right. Well, welcome everybody to a special edition of the One Shot Podcast. We've got Darren, Ben, myself, Tyler here at the Super Bowl in Arizona. And we've been blessed enough to be asked back after not screwing up last year too bad. But partnership with Sleep Number, and y'all have just been incredible to us. And we're just so thankful for the partnership and support that you've given. And really thankful, as we're going to get into today, thankful for just what you are doing, not only with your products and improving life, but even outside of just your physical products that you sell, the mission that you have. And we're going to talk about that today. We're talking about a couple other things, kind of the direction society is going, just as it relates to health, wellness, mindset, empathy, ways that we talk about it all the time. And it's not a complicated solution to redirect the direction that we're going, but it's not an easy solution, and we really need to change some minds and change some habits. But today we are blessed with the presence of Sleep Number CEO Shelly Ibach and Dr. Kamal, who is with American Cancer Society, and we're going to dig into everything that you're doing to improve the lives of not only cancer patients, but the caregivers and family around them. And we're excited to talk. Yeah. Thank you both for letting us steal some of your time this morning. Wow. It's a busy week for y'all, I know.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to be here and really appreciate our partnership and all the great work you're doing. So it's terrific to bring all of us together.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's not just that, Shelly. Come on now. Look, I think this relationship is so much different. I mean, I've had the opportunity, my wife and I have had the opportunity to know you and get to know who you are as a person outside of Sleep Number. And Tyler just hit it. Empathy is so strong within you, and just the giving back and serving others is so special. And you've always, in our time, in our short relationship that we've had in the last couple of years, you've really been a pioneer for so many out there, and someone to look up to. So I know we're talking this way and we're having this conversation. Yes. But the relationship is so much tighter and so much friendlier than that. So
yeah. This is episode, I think, 330 something. That was probably the best intro, Tyler, you've ever had on this podcast.
Also, the first compliment Ben has given.
Yeah, that was really
ever
30 episodes.
Ever.
This means a lot. This is a great day.
Don't cry.
All right.
Well, I have to just build on what Darren said, because for us, we always think about and just renewing our partnership with the NFL yesterday. It's more.
Congratulations.
Yeah, by the way,
Thank you.
we're going to hit on that. But.
So awesome.
Yes.
But it's more than a partnership.
Yeah.
It's a relationship.
Yeah.
And, when we look to extend ourselves and partner with others, it always has to go back to, do our values align?
That's right.
And is it a relationship that's sustainable and allows us both to grow together?
That's right.
So I love that you brought up the authenticity of our partnership.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, and that is key. Is I feel like today we're a society that what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? Can I get it now?
Yeah.
And the long-term sustainability, success, impact comes from what you just talked about, relationship. Do our missions align? Can we serve others without expecting something back?
Exactly.
And good things will happen on the backside of that, but focusing on serving other people first. And that is 100% the mission of what you both are doing. And so we're excited to dig into it. I do want to call something out that's really exciting. In addition to the extension of the contract of your relationship with the NFL, but this last year, Sleep Number was voted the American Cancer Society Corporate Partner of the Year. This is a big thing, and this is a new initiative that y'all started in the last couple of years. And not only is it impactful to patients and families that are battling this illness, but also to your team and the company and the culture of Sleep Number within. And I just want to read a quote from someone on your team who, again, is not the CEO, is not necessarily the president, is not with American Cancer Society. This is just someone on your team that said, Sleep Number may not find the cure to cancer, but we can be the calm of cancer.
Yes.
Providing relief, providing quality of life to those that are in the fight against cancer. So that just, to me, that speaks volumes of what you are building within and your entire team. And I was talking to a handful of people yesterday just about Sleep Number, and like top to bottom, they are a reflection of the leadership, but like just great people that want to do great things.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that more companies try to emulate that model across the country, because we'd be better for it.
And Shelly, I need to ask you that question, because your father went through cancer, and that quote speaks firmly to you. Can you give us a little background on that, what that quote means to you?
My father, he passed away from cancer, 12 years ago. But he had a really, rough 6-month battle. And he started with kidney cancer that metastasized, and he ended up with bone cancer. And so he was in significant pain all the time. And he would always go back and lie down on a Sleep Number bed, and he was completely pain-free when he laid on his Sleep Number bed. It was absolutely amazing. And he said, Shelly, and one of his, last things he said to me is, Shelly, you have to get the word out. This bed is a miracle. You have to let people know the impact that this bed has. And so anyhow, here we are, and, I love the story from our sleep expert in one of our stores who, called Sleep Number the calm in cancer. And it was the one place my dad, could be pain-free. And that's pretty special.
That is.
To have that kind of impact.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dr. Kamal, I'd love to give you the opportunity to just kind of introduce yourself, the many hats that you wear, the things that you're doing right now. I mean, all the way from, the nonprofit space to actually seeing patients. I mean, you're doing a ton in this fight against cancer, but I'd love for you just to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to pepper you with maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then just let you go for the rest of the show. So we were doing some pre-show conversations. We're like, why are
Dr.
we even
Kamal
on
is
this?
going.
Why are we even on this?
No.
Well,
He's pretty good.
I appreciate that. And I just want to echo ACS's, real sincere appreciation for Sleep Number. They are the standard bearer as it relates to partnerships and really thinking about, the entire journey that a person goes with. So, for example, we know that probably between 40 and 45% of all cancers are preventable through changes in lifestyle. What we don't yet know is, what is the total magnitude of that impact that comes from really adequate and good sleep. And I think we all agree there is an important impact there. We really just need to measure it and understand it better. We also know that lifestyle changes, particularly in the survivorship setting. I mean, right now we've got about 17 million survivors in the U.S. of cancer who are living, trying to get back into normalcy. And during that time, we know that lifestyle changes are also important to preventing the cancer coming back. So I'm an oncologist. I see patients at Duke University in North Carolina. And in that role, patients ask me all the time, what can I do in the preventative setting, and what can I do after treatment? And I say, this is really important. You need to live in a very healthy, active way. And we know, for example, that inflammatory markers, and there's a lot of basic science about what happens when someone doesn't have good sleep, all contribute to, the right formula for cancers to grow and thrive. And that's what we're, fighting. So I appreciate you asking me to introduce myself. I wear many hats. As the Chief Patient Officer of American Cancer Society, I oversee all the patient, caregiver, and healthcare professional facing work that we do. Mention I'm an oncologist, but probably most importantly, I'm a family person. And so I am the bereaved son. So my mom died of breast cancer. And that drives me in terms of everything I do. And it drives me towards thinking about the experience for patients and, importantly, families and communities and what they face when going through, a journey. The good news is that, over the last 20 years, that the mortality rate for cancer has gone down by about 30% or so. But at the same time, 1.9 million Americans this year are going to hear you have cancer. And that means, 20 million or so caregivers and family members and others are also going to face a journey too. And no matter how curable or early stage or late stage, whatever it is a life-changing moment. And we just have to embrace the idea that no life is the same once you hear those words. And that means that people start to, in my experience, question everything. Sort of, what have I done? What am I going to do? What does the future look like? How should I live, interact, love, be in my community? And I think we at the American Cancer Society, particularly with partners like Sleep Number, are looking to see all the components of that experience and saying, how can we make it better so it's more compassionate, more high touch, more, and I'll say that it's at the same time where a lot more people are living with cancer than dying of it. And so we have to think about it as a chronic illness, right? So if you're going to live, for example, with advanced colorectal cancer for 4.5, 5 years, that means there's a lot of moments during that time where you can do things to help yourself live in a better way with higher quality of life. And that's really what we're focused on now. Let's say compared to 10 years ago, where we focused on, do we have treatment? Today, the answer is yes, we have treatment for most things, but it's like, how do we get people through treatment, and then on the other side so that they're well and happy, and that's ultimately our goal.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. And it's funny, I had this conversation last night with Don Davis, who's number 2 at the NFLPA, and what their mission is to support former players post-playing and continuing that health. And exactly what you're saying, the environmental impacts of lifestyle for players, right? You're so regimented and you're so dialed in, and then you don't have any more structure. And more often than not, athletes fall off. And I was a victim of that, where, my fitness, my sleep, my nutrition wasn't what it was when I was playing. And so just talking about the preventative aspect, the early screening, talk about the importance of that and identifying markers early on in the cancer process.
Yeah, well, most of our, the more common cancers, breast cancer, colon cancer, even lung cancer, cervical cancer, have early screening tests. And just to give your listeners sort of a cancer 101, is when we find something early, meaning that it's confined to the organ that it started in. So lung cancer, it's in the lung, it's, a centimeter or 2, so it's the size of a quarter. That means that we can cut it out when we find it at that point in time. And when we cut it out, that means we can avoid things like chemotherapy and radiation and things that people are really worried about when they think about what does it mean to be a cancer patient. And so the idea is, when you find it early like that, the chance of cure is 95%, 98%, I mean, almost 100%. And so what's really important is to really change the narrative from early cancer screening is about finding a problem, which is what people are worried about, because people are busy and we got a lot of things going on, and you're like, I'd rather just not think about it, if I can. To like, let's just get your lungs checked out. Let's get your, let's get these parts of your body checked out. So, and for most people, they find out there's nothing wrong. So then you kind of got peace of mind, right? And you move on with the rest of your life. Or we find something, cut it out, you're a cancer survivor, and you move on. And really, those improvements in mortality, a third less mortality now than in 1991, is really largely due to two things. One is tobacco cessation and all the policies that have gone into place there. And then I would say sort of the lifestyle changes associated with that. Because once you start a conversation about that, you can have a conversation about nutrition and active lifestyles and so on, sleep as well. The other part is screening. Is we've done a really remarkable job for most people, like mammograms, getting them to, across the country, about 75%. Now, that's both good news and bad news, because that means there's fourth of women walking down the street who may be at high risk and just don't know. And then the other thing I would say is, particularly, we are seeing a somewhat worrisome trend, which we have to explore further, in younger folks being diagnosed with cancer. And that's really where the lifestyle part is important, because if you think about, why does a 70-year-old get cancer? Well, it's probably because cumulative effects over a long period of time have led to some change in their genes, and so it's kind of an age-related, like what I would call a genetic oopsie, right? It just sort of happens. But when you see a person who's 40 with colon cancer, that means something was actively pinging their DNA constantly to have a problem with it. And that's what we're concerned about. I mean, we're starting to see reversals in trends where I mentioned cancer was going down, except for in young folks. So if you look at 35 to 50, those trends are actually going up in several different cancers. And so we're all kind of going, I wonder what's going on. Most of us hypothesize that that is lifestyle or environmental exposure or some combination of those things, where your genes are just being, bombarded with, not good stuff, whatever that is, over a period of time, and that's what's leading to that.
Now, do you think that could be related to what you mentioned earlier, an increase in pre-screening and early screening, so the numbers appear bigger? Or, I mean, are people just going undiagnosed and then, okay, now they're showing up at 50, 55, and they've been living with this? I guess you probably see it before that. But do you feel like people are going to combat earlier now than 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So if you control for that, which you can in studies, we still see this trend, particularly happening in places where we don't yet have screening guidelines in those ages. So, for example, if you're under 40, no one really recommends that a person does, for an average risk person, a mammogram or a colonoscopy. But the key to that statement is someone who is at average risk. Now, how do you know that you're at average risk? Well, the only really way to know is actually, and this is really important, is to talk to your family.
Right.
So here's what I hear. What I hear is, and Shelly talked about it too with her father, and I talked about it with my mom. What we hear is, grandma had cancer. What cancer was it? Well, it was, whatever. And you're like, well, was it though? Because the reality is grandma might have had a different cancer. And what people think is, if grandma didn't have, lung cancer, then my risk of lung cancer isn't high. But the thing is, cancers run in families with each other and then within the families too. And what I mean is, someone could have had breast cancer, and that means your chance of uterine cancer is actually higher. Or someone could have had stomach cancer, and your chance of breast cancer is higher because those things run in clusters together. And so what's really important is folks, particularly on the younger end, is sitting down, maybe over some wings over the Super Bowl and being like, hey, I know this is a little hard to talk about.
Baked wings.
Oh, yeah, we got to be healthy.
Yes.
No, for sure. And then getting to bed in time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
In your sleep number bed.
Absolutely. And then saying like, hey, now I know grandma had cancer. Let's talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And importantly, there's two things. One is, what was it? And the second part is, when did it start? Because generally, we recommend screening to start a decade before the age of the youngest person who had it.
Interesting.
So if grandma had breast cancer at 45, it's very likely that person needs to think about starting mammograms at 35.
Right.
And so those guidelines don't really apply to her. And so I think that's where we are is in this space, is both thinking, do we need guidelines for younger folks? And that's certainly, I think, coming along the way as we understand this better. But what can people do today? Have that conversation, because that's the only way to know.
Yeah. One of the things that, growing up in the inner city, and specifically in the last few years, ACS has really been grassrooting a lot and bringing a lot of awareness to cancer. Talk to us a little bit about the process in the inner city where folks can't afford to go see the doctor.
Access to good health care,
exactly.
access to good nutrition.
Yeah.
I mean, talk to us a little bit about ACS and how they're going into the inner cities and making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up. We're a grassroots organization, and we're thinking about, we're in 5,000 different communities across the country, and, we touch, on average, every year about 50 million lives in the work that we do. And that's all, funded by, the support of really active volunteers like Shelly, too.
Yeah.
All right, so that's really important because we're doing the work that maybe some others aren't able to do. And what we have to do is build trust, ultimately. I think what happened with just the pandemic, too, was just sort of questioning of the trust of any person who's speaking from a voice of authority, whatever that is. And what we know, for example, during COVID is that there were 22 million, we project 22 million missed cancer screenings.
Wow.
And so what we're worried about is what I just said in terms of the reversal of, all the bad things that were happening, meaning that people are doing better, less people are dying, et cetera. We're worried there's a reversal that's going to come if people don't catch up with those cancer screenings.
Right.
And part of that is a trust issue. Part of that can be a payment issue. What we ask people to do is call us at ACS at 1-800-227-2345, and we have insurance specialists to help people walk through that. We really believe, like many others, that insurance should not be a barrier to accessing screening. And then I think, we're also looking at food as medicine, right? And where are there food deserts within inner cities, for example? Where are there areas where community partnerships, whatever that looks like, will help engender trust? But I will also say that it's important to think about where there are implicit and explicit biases about what's happening. So a really good example is in the clinical trial space. So, most people don't know the story of pediatric cancer. So kids with cancer, right? So kids with cancer, gosh, no one wants to talk about it, but it's actually a really positive story. So today, 85% or so of pediatric cancers are cured. That was not the case 20 years ago. Now, why is that? And why don't adults see the same outcomes? Well, what I would say is this. It's because in pediatric cancers, kids with cancer, 90% of them are on a clinical trial. That means the new cutting edge, cool stuff that's out there, kids are seeing it early on. In adults, the average is about 5% of adults are on a clinical trial.
Why the discrepancy?
Well, I'll tell you. So, and then of persons of color, it's 2 to 3%. So why the discrepancy? There are major barriers. For one, adults don't get asked. And if you're a person of color, there are implicit biases that really go to, oh, well, person is black, and there's been a complicated history in the U.S. of black folk and clinical trials.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is just not ask. And that's the rub. So the rub is that if you ask, persons of color are just as likely to enroll in a clinical trial as a white person is, but they are less likely to be asked. And that's just an implicit bias. And that bias may be based on a lot of things that just stop short of just saying, just ask the damn question.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Just ask it.
Yeah.
And so, I think the major call to action here is we have to get more adults into clinical trials. They really, all of us, have to see clinical trials as where the latest, greatest, newest stuff is, and not so much around the concept of experimentation and treating people like lab rats and that, which is kind of the narrative.
Yeah, is that do we look at the terminology like clinical trial? Like you hear trial and it's like we're trying.
Yeah.
We're not sure if this works.
Yeah.
Because that's not necessarily the case because of the testing that's done prior to even getting to phase 3? Is that what clinical trial?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's 2 very rigorous trials that this drug has to go through before it even gets to that phase. I mean, could just terminology shift help with that?
Yeah, I think it could. I think normalizing it, just as we have in pediatrics, is really important.
Yeah.
Because oncologists are part of this too. I mean, we have to offer these things up more often. And we need to think about the barriers, particularly lodging and transportation are the 2 major barriers people don't enroll in clinical trials.
Yeah.
And our partnership with Sleep Number is a really great way. So we have this Hope Lodge program that we've worked together on. We have brick and mortar places where patients can stay. And those are in places like Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is, right? In Minneapolis, where we have people come from all over the world, and other places too. The idea being that participation in a clinical trial has a lot of logistical complexity to it. You have to stay somewhere for a period of time. You have to get there. You have to pay for food. I mean, you are, kind of housing yourself in a place. And through partnerships like with Sleep Number, we take away some of that logistical complexity by saying, hey, we got this. You focus on getting better.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one thing I really want to hit on. And Shelly, you have experienced cancer multiple times through your lifetime from a caregiver's perspective. And I want to talk about the importance of caregivers into the success in combating cancer. And really not only the success, but also the support that we need to provide for caregivers because of the impact. Because honestly, the caregivers, family members, in my mind, are just as much warriors through this.
Absolutely.
I mean, with whether it's parents trying to still provide for the rest of their family and then be there and support their child through treatment. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
Yes, the mental aspect of it as well.
Yeah, extremely fatiguing. Which is why our Sleep Number our smart bed plays such an important role in the lives of cancer patients and caregivers, because you have to start, each day. I mean, the best opportunity we have is starting each day fully recovered.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, and emotionally balanced, so you're prepared for the fight. So the 31 Hope Lodges across the country, we've, provided our Sleep Number pillows and other comfort items along with our smart beds, to really set the caregivers and the cancer patients up for success during their fight. As Dr. Kamal shared, we need everybody to be focused on the battle, not worrying about logistics, etc. One of the great things about ACS is that over 80% of funds collected goes directly back to either research, patient care, or advocacy, which is inclusive of not only the patient, but the caregiver. And if you're a patient in this battle, you really must have the caregiving aspect of it. And we want to take away all the things we can, so that people can win this battle and survive. And so it's such an important part of our partnership. And then also the guidelines, and we talk about whether it's inner city or, any one of us. One of the areas ACS has been so, really so successful is the guidelines they've provided. Think about around diet and tobacco, which has positively impacted all of our lives.
Right.
And what we're working on together, and part of the big important work of our partnership, is the research that we're doing together to find the unlock of the relationship, if there is one, which we strongly believe there is, between sleep and cancer. And we know that we can provide prevention by higher quality sleep. We see that. I mean, there's science evidence of that. And it's not only the emotional, preparation for the fight, but it's that physical and mental well-being as well. But to be able to understand the impact and doing the combined research with our data and the cohort studies that American Cancer Society already has in place, and to be able to provide that unlock, and also the tools and the science and the guidelines that will help survivors and patients and all of us with prevention. So that's a really important goal of ours together, is to provide that level of guideline, and it can go to everybody.
That's right. No. I love that. It's funny, and I'm not a huge social media guy, and honestly, there's a lot on social media. It just drives me crazy. And one sector that drives me crazy as much as any is like kind of this fitness sector, right? And all these people that are pushing and selling all these things. But one of the good things that does come from that, at least, is the encouragement that sleep is the foundation of health. Yeah. Like over the last few years, if you listen to any wellness podcast, if you listen to any health and fitness podcast, any weight loss podcast, anything, like sleep is now at the forefront because they are finally starting to understand and recognize the importance of
recovery.
Sleep.
Yes.
Recovery to overall mental health, physical health. And so that I want to say it's encouraging that is now on the forefront of everyone's minds. And I want to say this with the most respect, is you think, okay, a bed, what does that have to do with cancer? It has everything because of what it allows you. And, Dak's commercial, what it's like, sleeps 23% better with the Sleep Number bed than he does without.
Yeah, 28.
28, sorry. Thank you.
Great number, too. By the way, what a great number that is. 28.
There we go.
But that is beyond impactful. Like, that is a game changer when you talk about overall performance. Whether you're getting up to work to be a parent, or as difficult as it is to get up and head-on battle with cancer.
Yeah, I think it's a broader conversation on what's quote-unquote sexy and what's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't really sell sleep as much as you can a workout program or a product or a new supplement. And so I love what y'all are doing. You're bringing sleep and recovery more to the forefront, because I come from the fitness background, and it's much easier for me to get likes and subscribers if I'm showing you some crazy exercise than it is if I just say, hey guys, go get better sleep.
Yeah.
So how are you guys helping reverse, or not reverse, but how are you helping bring sleep and its importance to the forefront, especially you, Dr. Kamal, in your field? How are you introducing this to people to get them to buy in as opposed to the sexy stuff they see online?
Yeah. Just one more episode of Netflix. We're good. Yeah.
That's right. Well, look, I mean, I'll represent the medical community. We're scientists, and we want to be able to make the right recommendations. Yeah. And so, what I worry about is that there is agnosticism in the medical community on this topic. And this is not the only, sort of lifestyle component that's important for prevention and survivorship. We do the same thing in nutrition and other things too. We need to get to a future state where physicians are providing prescriptions for the components of sleep that are important. And that's not just duration, but that's quality, that's frequency.
Yes.
And to this point of sort of rest and recovery, I'll just tell you that we make decisions, for example, just very tactically around chemotherapy based on what we assess. I mean, this is like an eyeball test. We'll look at patients and kind of go, what could they endure, right? And for some people, the options might be 2 or 3 treatments at one time. But look, let's just be real, right? If they look a little ragged, right? If they don't look ready, right? It's kind of like looking at a marathon runner, because that's what cancer is. You're running a marathon. So if you look at a marathon runner at the starting line, and they look tired and not fed and kind of not nourished, and they just kind of look a little rough, right? You kind of go, I don't know that I'm putting my money on that horse, right?
That's interesting, because I always felt like when it came to chemo, basically it was
there's a formula.
You painted everybody with the same broad brush.
No, not at all. In fact, we here's the deal. Here's the equation, right? So patients learn that how they show up to me is going to dictate how everything's going to go. So this is why people wear their Sunday best. They show up in a wheelchair, but they leave it out in the hallway around the corner so I don't see it, right? They're kind of giving me the best of what they got. Okay? And my job is to figure out, is chemo going to hurt them or help them? And which is going to be more likely to happen, right? And so if I'm looking at someone, like I said, back to this marathon, because, right, like for some of these cancers, you're living years with it, right? So I'm making a decision not about just today, but what are we going to do over the next months or years? And you're looking a little like not at your 100%. It will affect my decision making. Okay? And that's just at the decision making level. I mean, the biology and the science is yet to be determined. But this is what I say to my patients is you got to be ready, right? Like you don't go into battle, right, with not, if it's a video game, with not all your points at the top, you know what I mean? You don't go into a marathon kind of looking like, I didn't get much sleep last night. You're like, you're not going to finish 26 miles. There's no way, right? Like, and I think that what's happening in cancer is when people think about cancer, they think about something that is much shorter in time interval. They think about something that's like, we don't got time to talk about anything else. Why are you talking about sleep? Like, we got to just, we got to get chemo in the person.
Right.
But now we're talking about marathons, not sprints. And when you're talking about marathons, not sprints, there are other things to consider, like what we're talking about today, that you need to absolutely consider in that equation. You just have to.
Yeah. Talk about the impacts of lifestyle versus medication as a form of treatment. Like, I mean, how impactful is one or the other? Because obviously, you reach a certain point, carrying cancer, living with cancer, that, hey, you do need medication, like in order to combat this. But is that it? I mean, do you just solely rely on the medication at that point? And you mentioned it very early on, is being able to then change lifestyle, improve lifestyle, continue lifestyle, whatever it may be after that point.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from a prevention perspective, we believe 42% of all cancers are prevented by lifestyle changes, period, right? And so we're not even talking about treatment anymore. That's just, you just didn't get it, right? We found it and, or it never happened in the first place. But it's also important to remember that these changes in the survivorship perspective are really important. So, for example, for the average woman who is treated with chemotherapy for breast cancer, she gains on average 15 to 20 pounds. That's our fault, because we give her steroids and fluids and, and there's part of this, like, which is a misnomer, this sort of like sick role, right? You think about someone you might know who's diagnosed with cancer. What we tend to do is be like, take it easy, don't da-da-da, we'll bring a bunch of food by.
Here's a sugary drink.
Right. You need to get your weight up. Yeah. We do these things out of love and concern.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they can be detrimental. Here's what we know. If that woman who gains 15 to 20 pounds that year during the course of treatment does not lose that weight back to her baseline within the next 365 days, her chance of that breast cancer coming back goes up by a third.
Wow.
So for her, we're like, look, this is all hands on deck. We got to do what we need to do so you can get that back down. And so that's the part where, medication or not, right? Like that, no medication is going to bring her risk down by a third, right? Not at that point in time. At that point in time, we're saying that's on you.
Right.
Right.
It's almost like you're building them mentally. You're building them up mentally.
Totally.
With confidence to understand, to let them know that they can get through this process.
Totally. Well, and think about the cancer journey. For most people, when I talk to patients, the hardest part is giving up control to something that's uncertain, right? And I like, look, I deal with attorneys and accountants and high functioning professionals and CEOs like Shelly, right? So the thing is, nothing is more of a common denominator. I don't care how much schooling you went to, how, where you are in a C-suite org chart, cancer levels everyone.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what people say to me is, Dr. Kamal, you know what's so hard is I don't feel like I have control. And as I say, this is where you have control. Tell me about your sleep. How can you control that better? Tell me about your nutrition. Tell me about your lifestyle. those are things you can control. And by the way, I'm not just saying that to be nice, because if you do those right, you're also controlling your outcomes, which is ultimately what people want, is agency, right? I want to be like, I can affect the outcome, not just a pill, right? Like not just a conversation with an oncologist.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I want to come back to the caregiver aspect, and I want to talk about if somebody's listening, that family member or someone close to them is battling cancer right now. What is some encouragement to them? You know, when it comes to empathy, support, encouragement, what are some encouraging just thoughts because of both of y'all's experience that either, hey, maybe I wish I would have done this, learning it after, or some of the, you know, the thousands of patients you've seen, okay, hey, look, these are really impactful, you know, ways to just interact.
Yeah, I remember one of the most defining moments when George, my late husband, was battling leukemia, and we were preparing for a bone marrow transplant. So he was in, you know, we were living in the hospital, and he had just finished a, you know, really difficult round of chemo to try and get things back to a position where he was eligible for the bone marrow transplant. And we found out it was actually, interestingly enough, 6 years ago this week, the doctor came in and said, guess what? It didn't work. In fact, the leukemia is worse. But don't worry, we have another round, you know, a worse chemo, one that is going to be much harder, but it could possibly work. And we can start that, you know, within the next 24 hours. Back to the sizing up, you know, and this is all very individualized. You know, they don't know for sure. They take the best approach, but then they have to reassess and decide again. So it was obviously devastating news for both George and myself. And it was such a difficult time, and it was on Valentine's Day. And a friend, we were talking to a friend, and they talked to us about acceptance. And so one of the most important, you know, pieces of information I can give is learn how to accept throughout your journey. So when you have faith leads to acceptance. And once you accept where you are, you can then move forward. But until you can fully accept, you really cannot move forward, because you keep wishing it was different than it was. And your energy is misplaced, and you need all of your energy on the battle, you know, which kind of goes back to the sleep and the you know, preparation. But that was one of the most valuable lessons. And the next day we woke up and we were fully ready. We had accepted where we were, and we were ready to start the next round with, you know, an incredible amount of energy and faith and belief.
Who was there for you through that process? You
like
and George.
Who was that person on the phone? That was actually one of my board members and her husband, who shared that story with us. But, you know, I would say, you know, everybody is there for you. What's difficult as a caregiver is everyone is reaching out, trying to find out how the patient's doing. And, you know, quite frankly, this battle, you have to be all in as the caregiver and the patient. So you don't really have time to take care of everyone else. Half of the people want to know just out of curiosity. You know, the other half really care. And so if you want to support somebody who's in this battle, have empathy, anticipate what they need. And we had one set of friends who they never asked us what we needed. They just did. They figured out, like they knew that, hey, we needed someone to go take care of our vineyard. We needed someone to take care of our cat. You know, we needed these. They just jumped in and provided. You know, they would drop food off for me at the hospital. The last thing in the world you want to do as a caregiver is ask. Is ask for it, and you don't have the bandwidth because your focus is on your person.
That's right.
And you want to put all your
Oh,
energy
man,
there.
that's so true.
And people
Yeah.
are so, all your friends and family, I mean, they want to be there for you, but you don't have time to answer their questions.
Yeah.
It's way too much
Yeah, and
energy.
I'm with you. My brother passed away 3 years ago, and had liver cancer, and
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times at 2:00 in the morning I had to pick him up and take him to the bathroom.
Right.
And
Exactly.
people will never know those stories
No. And it
of
just brings you to
someone that's so strong their entire life, and you're having to pick them up and take them
Yes.
to the bath. I don't have time to take calls.
Yes.
I don't have time,
Exactly.
for so many, and that's the life of a caregiver. Is you're pouring into someone else so much that you
Yes.
kind of lose track of what's going on. And if you don't have, and I'll give you my example. I was staying at his condo and I was sleeping on his couch,
Yep.
and I was so wore out.
Exactly.
I mean, you bring in Sleep Number. If I wish I had a
Yeah.
Sleep Number bed, I could have been sleeping on. But I was mentally and physically just so fatigued in helping do and I wasn't alone. I had my family members that were there as well. But I mean, for those caregivers that are out there, they're doing the job.
Yes.
We just have to have that empathy and continue to push and help as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, Darren, you mentioned that empathy as a caregiver, and that's your brother.
Yeah.
What about the empathy of the caregivers that aren't related that you interact with on a daily basis, and the appreciation for those people? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's always surprising to run into folks who don't have a primary caregiver. And really, we define primary caregiver as a person who's doing 75% of the help, who's that one person. And what we do know is it affects outcomes. So people with caregivers survive longer than people who don't. That's stage for stage, pound for pound, cancer for cancer, right? I mean, it is a difference maker. The reality, though, is that being a caregiver can also be an isolating experience. And I'll just say overall, when people think about a cancer experience, what they think about is everyone's rallying, like meal trains going on, like all this stuff's happening. And that for most people, that's true for a period of time. But I mentioned this cancer journey is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right, that's right.
And what happens is there was this term I heard someone use called cancer ghosting, right? Literally means that people start ghosting you because they're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask. Feels kind of doom and gloom, and I don't know how to, I don't know, blah, blah. And, hey, let me know if you need something. And they never text back.
Follow back up.
Right.
Right.
And they're just like, oh, I guess they don't need anything. And what I say to the folks I take care of is like, no, for you to be a good supporter, say, hey, I was thinking I'm bringing dinner by on Friday. Is that good with you? And then it's an invitation for someone to say, well, I don't need that, but could you pick up groceries because I can't get around to it. And so that goes from like kind of an open-ended, like, I'm here for you, which, as Shelly mentioned, people don't take you up on that offer. It's not a thing that happens. But the other thing we're starting to realize is social isolation and loneliness, particularly among both patients and caregivers, is a real thing. In fact, there's some studies that show nearly half of people report that, because as that marathon goes on, people kind of fade away into the background, or you stop getting invited to things. So imagine you're a caregiver and you're always used to going to, ladies' brunch after church on Sundays, and what people do is like, oh, she's kind of busy taking care of, her husband, so we won't invite her. And what happens is that leads to like, well, then she wasn't there, so she didn't hear about the birthday party for so-and-so. Now she's not going to the birthday party, blah, blah. And next thing you know, you have no other plans than to be the caregiver, which is super important. But at the same time, you kind of turn around and go, well, who's got my back? Right. So when I talk to my patients and caregivers, I say, like, you need to learn to ask for help. And you need to, like, help people know sort of the words about how to engage with you, right?
Yeah.
And so that it's not every conversation, for example, is not some doom and gloom story or something like that. Call and have a normal conversation about something else. Yeah. That's okay, because that type of self-care is really important, because the caregiver's running the marathon too, not just the patient.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And so they got to be fit and ready, and every morning wake up and be ready to do the work. We know that the mortality rate for caregivers is higher because they don't do their normal health stuff too, right? And so for them, sleep, lifestyle, blah, blah, all that suffers too, right? And that leads to health consequences that they face, all while they're sort of the silent warriors, as you said, right? They're the silent warriors. And we as a medical community have to do a better job checking in. I mean, I strive in my medical practice to turn to the caregiver and say, like, how are you doing? And normally you can read their eyes. And sometimes what happens is their eyes say, They say, oh, I'm doing good. Their eyes say something different.
That's right.
And you know what I do? I find a way to pull them out in the hallway, or I'll be like, oh, yeah, we got to get a blood test for the patient. Can I talk to you? And I just look them in the eye and be like, hey, what's up? Like, how can I help you? What's going on? Who's a trusted adult you can talk to when things get rough? Because it's amazing how many people are like, I don't got someone to call. And you're like, okay, we got to work on that.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because empathy it's difficult, because if the problem doesn't personally affect me, it's hard for me to get out of my own stuff and think about other people. So I love that what you just shared of, you've got a lot going on. You've got patients you got to see. So for you to take the time and have that awareness, that emotional intelligence in you to say, no, I need to check on these other people too, despite all I have going on. That's a great example. I love that.
Yeah, and let's go back to just empathy. And I think that is a trait that is becoming more and more rare nowadays. So let's go back to the foundational teaching of this, like with parents. Like, what is guidance that y'all have to say, look, here are some things that you can do early on to teach children about empathy from an early age, whether it's service, whether, we used to take our kids to Children's Medical Center in Dallas, and every year we take Christmas gifts, and just for them to see the kids and to go experience it, to love on them. I mean, it's 2 hours. Out of your day to go do something like that and just spend some time. And it's one of our favorite things to do.
Yeah.
And because my wife, she went through that, and she lived in the hospital with her sister, her entire family, and they were dying, and she just understood that. Like, they just wanted someone to come in and talk to them. Yeah. Like, that wasn't about this battle that they're facing every day, the entire family. But talk about maybe some things that you've seen that parents have done well about teaching empathy.
I think it really I'm going to go back to sleep, because I do think it really starts with teaching your kids the importance of sleep. So back to, sleep is sexy. And I mean, that's part of why we did the partnership with the NFL, because we want these, big, strong athletes, to talk about how much they value sleep and how important it is to their recovery. So for parents to teach their kids about the importance of, bedtime routine and getting sleep, that sets you up to be your best self. That gives you the physical, mental, and emotional recovery. It provides you the ability to be present. And I think so much of empathy starts with being present. Yeah. So therefore, it starts with having a great night's sleep.
Yeah, great point.
Every day, first thing I do is look at my sleep IQ score. Then I take my time, to do my reading and just reground. Yeah. Then I move into the day. And teaching kids to take that moment to make sure you're present for all life delivers. Yeah. In that day, that leads to kindness. Yeah. And that's empathy. Yeah. Then you're calm, and you're listening, and you're caring, and you're thoughtful. Yeah. And you don't rush through the day.
Yeah, you're not waking up, scrambling, grabbing something to eat on the way out, grab, coffee to go, stressing to get to this.
It's your time to be selfish for self, right? Because if you don't take care of self, how can you take care of everyone?
Otherwise, you're going to be selfish for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Yes. If you don't, so true.
Yes. Just ask Ben that. He'll tell you. He's selfish all the time.
All the time.
100% of my day, I'm selfish.
All the time. And he gets like 13 hours of sleep every night. Yeah. So.
Well, that at least means you're sexy.
That's right. Thank
you got one thing.
Transit property.
I'm going to cut that clip right there, and that's going to be blasted everywhere.
Whitney, did you hear that?
Well,
we know we could talk about this all day long. Unfortunately, we're up against the clock here. How can, maybe we end it with this, how can those of us that aren't personally affected, maybe we don't have a family member, we don't have a close friend, how can we get involved? How can we support the cause of both Sleep Number and ACS moving forward?
Well, I think advocacy and visibility to these issues, I mean, we've made a lot of progress in the past couple of decades. I mean, we really have. And I think that what we're really getting to is a shift from, are there treatments, the availability, to how do we make sure people get what they need, which is about accessibility. Yeah. And that delta is way too big right now. And we have to think about all the different ways that people are their best self, physically, emotionally, mentally, in all the different ways, because cancer hasn't gotten easier. It's just we've gotten smarter about, and we're starting to understand where those factors are that we didn't think about 10, 15 years ago, frankly. And really, Sleep Number's at the cutting edge of this, working with us, because we kind of all go, it's one of those things where you go, yeah, there has to be an impact here. We know it. We feel it. Mm-hmm. I know I'm not my best when I don't sleep the whole day. We know, for example, on the empathy, that medical training, I've been on call for 40 hours in a row without any sleep at all. Yeah. And I can tell you my empathy scores on that 40th hour.
Yeah.
And the ability to be insightful is to be like, shoot, that was not my best interaction with a patient, but they're expecting my best, right? The 40th patient I see that day is expecting what the first patient got.
Right. Yeah, they're no less important.
That's correct, right. Correct. Right. And that humility to understand that moment you can't ever get back, particularly if it didn't go well, they will remember that. And so I think in the medical community, we're saying that's a pivotal moment. We got to treat it that way. And so I think that, but this is about community and collectively working together. And I think that, not that long ago, we would have thought, a relationship between Sleep Number and ACS and the NFL, that sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. And now we're just like, no, duh. Of course it has to work that way. Of course it has to work that way. How else are we going to figure out these really important problems so that people live better and longer lives?
Right. Yeah.
I'll share two things. One, let's just all focus on prevention. Great quality sleep, eating well, and physical activity. And secondly, screening. We talked about it earlier. It is the easy button, both of these. I mean, for sleep, all you have to do is get in your smart bed, and it will take care of you and ensure you get quality sleep. And then there's a great tool that ACS has developed called the Defender, and it gives you a quick assessment. It's available to everybody, and then get your screening. Yes. And so let's all focus on and getting everyone involved and ensuring that those simple acts are present for all of us.
Love it. Love it. We can't thank you all enough for taking some time. I know this is
you.
really big week, and we just appreciate you. And just know that the One Shot team is behind you 1,000%. Support any way that we can. Anything y'all need from us, we're there because you guys are making a change.
You're the tip of the spear. Change. This is the tip of the spear. ACS, Sleep Number together. And look, I don't take anything lightly. And I know that the partnership with ACS and Sleep Number and the NFL, it's intentional.
It is.
And we need to be intentional about that. And we can't step back and be passive in these type of situations because there's a lot of people out there that are listening that can just take the first step of sleeping better or going to get screening or doing the little things. Let's be bold. And let's continue this boldness in moving forward with this relationship. So I appreciate you guys for
I love it. Thank you for leaning in.
Thank you.
Such an important topic.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
We appreciate it. Sleep well, dream big, everyone.
That's great.
Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs.
Is that what you said? Is that what you said? I'm not going to argue that one.
Okay, there we go.
Let's go.